Hi fellow bookworms and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. It is so lovely to have you. Because I so often talk about new book series I'm excited about or even new standalones, I thought today I would talk instead about sequels. Now this will be sequels that I already have on my TBR. These will be ranked by the books I'm least to most excited about, and I have 11 here. I'm not going to go into massive detail about them, especially because they're sequels. I wouldn't want to spoil anything for anyone, but I'm just going to give you my reasoning behind why I am either super or not so much excited to read them. So if you want to join me, you can grab a drink. Mine is a peppermint tea today. Let's get in. In 11th place, I have Kingdom of the Feared by Kerri Maniscalco. This is the third and final book in the series, and this is basically a deal brokered between a demon and a witch. As well said, I kind of feel like that's all you need to know about these anyway. A lot of people have spoken about how much they disliked this book, and I think that's why there's a little bit of trepidation going into reading this. I think even for me, having read book 1 and 2, I really loved Kingdom of the Wicked, the first one, and a lot of people didn't even like that one because they felt it was too tropey. It is, but I still really enjoyed it. I like the Italian setting. I like the dynamic between Amelia, our main character, and Wrath, the demon and love interest. And I just really liked the plot too. I think there were quite a few twists and turns that maybe you didn't see coming. And I was excited at the end of book 1 to see where book 2 went. With book 2, I felt a little less excited just because we changed setting. And a lot of the charm of book 1 for me was the setting. We were in the coastal Italian town, which was really lovely. Still, I enjoyed it. I did think book 2 suffered from like book 2 syndrome in that nothing really happened, not especially given the amount of questions we had at the end of book 1. I would have liked to see those plot points actually being developed, and I felt like they weren't with this, even though I am a little bit fearful about whether I'll actually like it, just to see the continuation of Wrath and Amelia's dynamic, to see how things are actually going to play out is going to be really interesting. It's very romance forward in book 2, and I'm interested to see how this one fares, whether it's still much of the same or whether we actually start to see kind of ends being tied up. So yeah, I'm excited if it's just to say that I finished the series and I can move on with my life. In 10th place is The Merciless Ones by Namina, Forna. This is the second in what I believe is a trilogy, the first being The Gilded One. I read The Gilded Ones a little bit ago, so my memory probably isn't the sharpest, but I remember it being about this young girl who is very different, and so she's immediately kind of outlawed and feared for her differences, and she somehow ends up being this warrior for her kingdom or empire, and it poses this question between whether she is a monster or a warrior. And you really see her struggle with her identity throughout the first book. The issue, I think, with book 1 was that it didn't feel like too much was happening, and by the time the plot really does ramp up, you've then reached the end. And I have a pet peeve, and that's books that feel like they are purely written to set up a sequel book, and that is the feeling I got with The Gilded Ones. Now, for that reason, I am excited for The Merciless Ones, just because I think it's set up quite a few questions, which we will hopefully answer in book 2. Still, I wasn't the most excited by the end of book 1, and so I think that's why I've been putting this one off. I will get to it soon because I've heard people say they like this one a lot more than they did The Gilded Ones. In 9th spot, I have Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor, and this is the follow-up to Daughter of Smoke and Bone. Again, I read that quite a while ago, but it had such an intriguing plot and world building, because we basically had this orphan girl who grew up with one foot in the real world and one foot in this magical world. I haven't rushed off to read this one purely because it's been such a long time since book 1 that I've kind of forgotten the magic of that book. Still, I'm really excited to dive back into this world because we saw in book one this dynamic between the two main characters, and it had changed so often, even in book one, that I'm really excited to see how much more it can change in book two and book three. I think there's still a lot of story left to tell, and so I'm really excited to see how that changes, how our main character comes into her own. We also had a sense of like urgency at the end of book one, which I'm really excited to see explored a little bit more in the rest of the series. But overall, I remember this being like super richly imagined. It was so whimsical but also like dreamy, and it was set in Prague, which was just absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, this was beautifully written as well. So I'm kind of as I'm talking about this book, I'm wondering why I haven't gone in for book two and three yet. In eighth spot, we have Wayward by Hannah Matthewson, and this is the follow on from Witherwood. Now, Witherwood was a super fun book. I really enjoyed it because it was similar to V. Schwab's Shades of Magic series in that we had an alternate London. The one was magical, the one was just our ordinary world. And in this magical London, we discovered these different factions who could all perform different magic, and it was just a really enjoyable read. There was also a little bit of a murder mystery element to it, in that our main character had to go and look for her missing brother. This one, I think, doesn't exactly follow on from Witherwood. I think this follows a different character that we see introduced in book one. So even though it's a sequel, it's not a direct sequel or continuation from our main character's story in book one, but it's still, I imagine, is the same world, and we're diving into see it from a different perspective. In seventh place, Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second of the King of Scars duology. It follows Nikolai's story. As per Leigh Bardugo books in the Grishaverse, we do have different perspectives. It isn't 100% a Nikolai story, but he is definitely the central character in these. The only reason this isn't higher on my list is just because I wasn't quite on board with King of Scars for some reason. Even though Nikolai is probably my favorite character from the Shadow and Bone series, apart from the Darkling, because come on, it's the Darkling. But Nikolai was a firm favorite in the trilogy. So I don't know. I couldn't quite get on board with King of Scars, even though he was still witty. We also see him a little bit more tortured because of the events of the original trilogy. And I don't know, I just think because I read them kind of in sequence, which means I read Shadow and Bone, the first three books. I then read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, and then read King of Scars. I think because I loved Six of Crows so much, it just wasn't quite getting to the same level as Six of Crows. And I think for that reason, it kind of left me feeling a little bit underwhelmed. And that's why I haven't rushed back to read Rule of Wolves, even though I am excited to see how it continues, especially because there was a whopper of a reveal towards the end of King of Scars. And so I really should just dive back and finish this out. But yeah, I will get to this one hopefully quite soon. In the sixth spot is Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. Serpent and Dove is another book that people find extremely tropey, and for that reason, they don't like it as much and they don't feel like it's particularly a good book. And again, I do agree with the fact that it is tropey, but I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it a 5-star when I read it last year. If I had to kind of reevaluate it now, I'd maybe drop that score slightly, but I still really liked it because basic premise is that we have this witch and witch hunter. Oh, give me forbidden love. But if you then also throw in the fact that there is like marriage of convenience and like forced proximity, oh man, and I just found it so enjoyable, and I really did enjoy the relationship and seeing how that kind of shaped over time. If I remember correctly, this one is going to focus more on Coco, who was our main character's best friend in the first book, and her coven. The only reason I haven't properly dived into this is because I'm going to buddy read this with the same friend I read book 1 with, and our schedules just haven't aligned. She is also a bit of a chunky book. I think that's why I've maybe avoided her a little bit, but yeah, hopefully soon. In the 5th spot, I have Eye of the Shitstorm by Jackson Ford, and this isn't really a series very many people talk about. It is essentially Alias with superpowers. Now, growing up, I absolutely loved Alias. Jennifer Garner was like one of my idols growing up. I adored that show so much. And so obviously that would be super attractive to me in a book. This is actually the 3rd in the series, and I believe there's another one out already. I don't know if that would be the final one or if it's just going to keep going, because I do potentially see this being a fat series, just because we have our main character who works for a little department that specializes in like the weirder cases. Could just cover a different case in each book. So far that is pretty much what it's been. Tegan, our main character, has to fight the big bad in each book. This is really fun. It's really witty. It's kind of silly as well sometimes, but it can also get like a little bit gruesome. So if you have like an aversion to gore, maybe check your trigger warnings before. But yeah, I really enjoy the series, and I kind of wish more people would talk about it because I think it's really fun. In the 4th spot, I have Cursed Crowns, and this one is by Katherine Doyle and Catherine Weber. This follows on from Twin Crowns. Not sure if it's a duology or if there'll be more books in the series, but anyway, this is the 2nd one, and I am actually very, very excited to return to this world. A set of twins. They were separated at birth. The one grew up in the palace as a princess, the other grew up in the small little village practicing magic, and they did not know about each other. In this world where magic is being oppressed, our witchy twin pretty much goes to usurp the throne from her sister so that she can bring magic back. I really like the individual girls. There was reason to root for both of them. I also like the relationships they found themselves in. It was like Parent Trap if one girl did not all sign up for it and did not all know what was going on. We had our witchy twin in the palace trying to be as royal as she could be and failing miserably. But yeah, I really liked the idea of it, and I liked how book 1 ended, and so I'm excited to dive into book 2. In the 3rd spot, we have Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. This is a proof copy that I won. Actually, I was very lucky to win it. I really like the look of it. This follows on from Ninth House, which is Leigh Bardugo's dark academia novel. In book 1, we saw Alex, who isn't at all privileged, come into this university where obviously there is a lot of privilege. Anytime you take a novel and you kind of tackle status quo and social and academic constructs, it's really fun. But then if you also throw in a murder mystery element, like, it just makes it way more fun. And Alex is a sassy main character. In this one, as we see someone go missing in book 1, now I obviously won't go into detail about that, but I think book 2 is mostly about trying to save that person. The only reason I haven't read this is because so many people have hyped this up that I'm almost scared to dive into it. I will hopefully get to it soon and report back. In the 2nd spot, we have The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. This is the 3rd and final book in the Scholomance. So it follows Deadly Education and The Last Graduate. A lot of people don't like Deadly Education, and I think I can see why, because it does feel info heavy sometimes because it is first person. We see everything from the perspective of Galadriel, our main character. So it can feel a little bit like a running commentary because we're in her head and like it's just a lot of information constantly. But I actually really like the way in which she addresses that information. It's always kind of witty, and there's a dark humor to the way she goes about her days. If you don't know what the series is about, it's pretty much like a deadly magic school. We have these magic users go into the school and they have to finish their education, which is like 5 years or something, and they need to graduate, but all the while avoiding getting eaten by like all of the ghouls in the school. I really love the premise of this. I love Gal as a main character. And so, like, this book, because there was such a big cliffhanger at the end of book two, I really want to know what happens next. I only recently got this copy as well because it just released on paperback. So I haven't had this for very long, but it is so high on my kind of priority list that I will likely get to this very soon. And then the sequel I'm most excited to read is, and then the world I'm most excited to return to is in Cytonic by Brandon Sanderson. This is book three, following on from Skyward and Starsight. And this is a YA sci-fi series. And I just really like this series. We have Spencer, our main character, who in book one doesn't ever think that she'll be able to join the Skyward flight. And then when it does happen for her, I feel like she gets a little bit more than she signed up for, but I think the series is so brilliant. There's also the unlikeliest companions, and that's all I can really say without spoiling anything. I feel like I remember Skyward, the first book, really clearly. Book two, not so much. So I might need to refresh my memory a tiny bit before I dive into this. But I just think these books are so well written. They're really fun. They can be quite tense too, especially like we have a lot of like dog fighting. So it is almost essentially like Top Gun in space. I just really, really like this series, and I love Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, I'm super excited to dive back into this world. So that's pretty much all of the sequels I currently own and the books I'm really excited to dive back into. I think a lot of the time for me, anyway, what happens is I almost prioritize new worlds over going back to something I have started. Making this video now has kind of shown me how excited I am to go back to these, and so I think I maybe move them all up a bit on my list of priorities and hopefully read them very soon. But let me know if you've read any of these series, if you have any sequels that you're eager to dive back into. If you've liked this video, you know what to do. Please consider subscribing. Please give me a thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you again soon. Until then, happy reading.